Hello and welcome everybody. Hope everybody's having a good day. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Jedi Knight slash Sith Warrior optimal PvP stats for each spec. It gives you a good kind of overview of where you should be as far as stats and everything goes. All of these things is basically credit to a guy named Sinrai. He's basically done all of the work. We're just going to kind of go over it in an easy to consume format. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we have Watchman slash Annihilation. Critical should be at 3,500. Anything past that, we're getting into DR for this spec. Power is our next stat we need to max. So anything after 3,500, we should be maxing power. It's not really feasible to do that. There's not really a good way to add a lot of power. If we're not able to add any more power than the rest, we're going to add mastery, because mastery is better than crit after 3,500 for this spec. So pretty much get power as high as possible and then move on to mastery. Alacrity, we were looking at 7.14%, so that's 2054. You can add a little bit more to compensate for lag or things like that, but generally, if you hit somewhere between 7.14, 7.2, somewhere between there. Accuracy, we're going to run 105% on this spec. This spec, it does do a lot of yellow damage. The problem is our yellow damage, we have to connect with our attacks. So essentially we need some accuracy just to get rid of it. You'll see if you play this spec with 0 accuracy, you will miss a lot of attacks, and that's something that this spec can't afford to do. Crystals, again, we're going to go with power crystals since in this spec power outperforms mastery. So make sure we're running power crystals in both slots. Our relic slot 1 again should be power. This spec doesn't need the high crit that other specs does. It really doesn't. A lot of people are saying max power. You're just max crit. I'm sorry. They're saying basically dump everything in the crit. That's incorrect. And you'll see that for a lot of specs as we go into. That's really a general guide, but it's not going to get you to the min max potential. So our relic slot 1, we want power. Relic slot 2, we want mastery. Our tacticals, we have 2 choices. So we have Spiteful Saber or Defel. Either one works. If you're going to be playing 8s, I would definitely go with Spiteful Saber. If you're going to be in 4s, you almost are forced to run Defel just because of how good it is. I think it's kind of stupid. It needs to be removed from the game, but that's a whole nother rant. Our legendaries, we have 3 options. You can use any combination of these options for Watchman or Annihilation. Really doesn't matter. They're all within about 1,000 DPS of each other. The most DPS is going to be Fearless Victor with Berserker's Call. If you do choose to use that, though, you are going to have to be very good with your management of resources. And then the next one is going to be Dispatcher. So Dispatcher just lets you use your rage slash focus. It pretty much just makes it so it's not an issue. So it's just a matter of what you want to do. If you use Dispatcher, you're going to give up about 1,000 DPS. In the grand scheme of things in PvP, not a big deal. So it's just a matter of how comfortable you are with the spec. If you're very comfortable, use Fearless Victor and Berserkers. If you're not as comfortable or newer to the spec, you can use Fearless Victor with Dispatcher or Berserkers with Dispatcher. Both of them are so similar, it's not even worth talking about. Next spec that we have on our list is going to be Fury slash Concentration. So this is going to be definitely a big change from what we saw with Watchman and Annihilation. Crit is going to be 4,800. Anything past 4,800, Mastery will start to outperform it. So we really want to hit that 4,800 crit in the spec. It's actually pretty easy to do because the spec doesn't need accuracy. So I would go ahead and stack it up to 4,800. After 4,800, we want to stack Mastery. Mastery outperforms power in this spec. Like I said, a lot of people think all the specs are the same. The specs scale differently. They just do. Next, we have Alacrity. So Alacrity is going to be pretty standard with this. So our 7.14% is going to be our min-max goal. Obviously, you can go a little bit higher just to compensate for lag. It's going to be a lot of a feel. Somewhere between 7.14 and 7.2 is generally a good idea. Accuracy, we don't need any accuracy in the spec. Spec does a lot of yellow damage. It doesn't really require you to actually make any type of checks against defense when attacking. So no accuracy. Kind of what makes the spec a little bit better than the other two as well. They can get by with running a little bit more points in a crit and things like that. Crystals, we want to run mastery crystals. We should easily be able to get to 4,800 crit. before, without using any type of other type of crystals. So mastery crystals, if you're below 4800 crit, just go ahead and use crit crystals until you get to that point. Relic slot 1, again, we're going to run crit. Fury is really good with crit, so we're going to keep doing that. Relic slot 2, we're going to run mastery. Our tacticals, pretty much 2 choices. So Cauterized Coronary is just a straight DPS buff. It's not a huge, though. I would recommend on this spec to run Defel pretty much all the time. This spec doesn't really need the DPS buff from its tactical. It does good damage, and the tactical doesn't really do that much DPS buff anyway. Our legendaries, there's only 2 choices. Every single Fury Marauder is going to run Fearless Victor, Berserker's Call. They're just best in slot. There's no third choice that makes any sense for the spec. Moving on, we have an interesting spec. So we have Carnage in Combat. So Carnage in Combat, as you see on the screen, is basically going to follow Fury / Concentration's DR tables. They're pretty much the exact same. So they're much the exact same that he didn't even bother to make another graph. So critical, we're looking at 4800. Again, anything past 4800, mastery is going to outperform it. So max mastery after 4800 crit. Alacrity is going to be where we have the interesting thing with Carnage. So you can go one of 2 ways. You can run a high APM build, where you go like 12 to 13% alacrity, or you can run the lower alacrity build at 4.14%. So about 4.2 roughly in there. It just depends on what your playstyle is. With the lower alacrity, you're going to be able to get more mastery and crit. With higher alacrity, you're not going to hit as hard, but you're going to hit faster. Both of them are viable. It's just really a playstyle thing. Next, we have accuracy. So accuracy for Carnage, 105%. Again, Carnage needs to hit, and it actually needs a hit defense chance. There's a lot of classes and a lot of defense buffs. So in PvP, I would recommend 105 just to kind of get around that, because if you don't run 105%, you will see the misses just scale outrageously. It's the same thing with Annihilation. You will miss a lot if you don't have that kind of accuracy. Our crystals, we should be running mastery crystals, because we should be hitting our crit breakpoint, which is through our gear and our augments. If you're not at 4800 crit, feel free to run crit crystals until you get up there. Our relic slot 1, again, it's going to be basically the same as Fury, so we're going to run our crit relic, which I spelled wrong. Yay for me. And then our relic slot 2, we're going to be running mastery. So mastery is going to be our slot 2. Pretty much goes to the same thing that Fury is. Our tacticals are going to be a very big choice. So Shard of Mortis is a huge DPS increase to Carnage. Defel has a huge survivability increase, so you're going to have to basically make the decision. Right now, I would basically lead to Shard of Mortis. I think it's better to have that big DPS increase and so survive a little bit longer, but it just really depends on playstyle. But Shard of Mortis right now is pretty strong. Legendaries, kind of the same with Fury. We only have 2. We're going to do Fearless Victor and Dispatcher. The spec has to run Dispatcher. It can't really get away with anything else just because it's so starved for resources, so starved for focus and rage. The rotation is very clunky right now. It has good damage, it's just clunky, and it's probably one of the most rage or focus starved specs that we have right now. So I would definitely run Dispatcher. You almost have to, it's almost essential. And then Fearless Victor just because it's a DPS increase. Next, we're going to take a look at the Juggernaut specs and the Jedi Knight specs. So we have Vengeance / Vigilance, crit rating of 3800. It has a low, as you will see, a lot of the dot specs, the crit is going to be less. We'll need less crit to hit the breakpoint where mastery or power outperformance. So in this spec, we're looking at 3800 crit. Past 3800 crit, mastery will outperform power every day of the week, so we want to go ahead and stack mastery after 3800 crit. Our alacrity is going to be pretty standard in this spec, so we want 7.14%. You can go to 7.2 if you want. If it helps lag compensation, you can even run higher. It's completely up to you. Accuracy in this spec, we don't need any. There's a lot of yellow damage. You can make the argument that 105 is useful and feels good, but realistically, it does so much yellow damage, and the way that the spec works is a lot of times you're not directly attacking a player. It's a lot of AoE stuff, so don't really need the accuracy as much as you would on something like Annihilation. Our crystals, we're going to run Mastery Crystals because it just outperforms once we hit that crit. The crit is really easy to hit this spec, so we should be really stacking our Mastery as high as we can get it. Relic Slot 1, we're going to have our Mastery Relic, and Relic Slot 2, we're going to have Power. Our tactical, we have two choices. So we have Cut to Pieces. Cut to Pieces is our AoE tactical in this spec. It's someone generally you're going to run for 8s. There's no reason to not run Cut to Pieces. It can really pump out some huge numbers, some huge AoE. Hemophilic Slash would be good if in like 1v1 situations. It's their single target damage, but most of the time you're running Cut to Pieces. Wouldn't be mad though if you ran the other one. Completely up to you as far as how you want to play it. Our legendaries, really only got 2 options. So we have Fearless Victor and Champion's Precisions. The other ones just don't do enough for this spec. So that's kind of where we are with everything. Then finally, we're moving on to Rage and Focus. This is going to be, again, this is going to really mirror Fury pretty well. The only difference is, and kind of a weird calculation that was made, but the crit is a little bit lower. So our critical is going to be at 4,600. After 4,600 crit, Mastery just outperforms it. So we're going to be stacking Mastery after 4,600 crit. Our Alacrity is still going to be that 7.14%. To 7.2%. Again, you can go a little bit higher. Alacrity is a big feel thing right now, just depending on lag and kind of where you are and just how smooth things feels. Accuracy, don't need accuracy in the spec. We're doing a lot of yellow damage, don't need it at all. Crystals, we want to go with Mastery Crystals. Our relic slots, again, the spec is really trying to hit hard, hit big crits. So we're going to have our crit in our relic slot 1, Mastery in relic slot 2. This spec really doesn't have good tacticals. I think that's really the biggest difference between this and Fury. They're both damage is actually similar-ish. It's not that big of a deal. It's just the survivability. So the only tactical even worth running is Cauterized Coronary. That just is the only thing even worth even looking at on the spec. Legendaries, again, we're kind of locked into Fearless Victor and Champion's Precision. It's kind of the same with all the DPS specs for Jugs. So that kind of concludes the video on the Jedi Knight specs. Over the coming days will be different videos for each spec. If you guys have any issues or have any questions, go ahead and put it down in the comments, or anything that you think is wrong. Again, thanks for Sinrai for all the work that he's done with this. It really kind of helps speed up everything and makes it kind of an easily format to put out. So everybody have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.